The way I practice is my job is to find out where they are. If they're sunk into themselves, then I approach them at a deeper level and meet them there. Or for instance, if their pulse is very fast, then I do a fast technique because it matches their energy. But my intention is not about what should happen.
I'm Michael Max, and this is Geological. We look to medicine to be solidly reproducible, like rolling cars off an assembly line. Patients want that kind of reassurance, and we do research for good reasons to prove or disprove a method or medicine is helpful. But at the end of the day, we are living creatures, not machines, and the long list of pharmaceutical side effects is proof positive that not all medicines affect everyone in the same way. The same knee replacement that allows one person to run, for another, they'll be dependent on a cane for the rest of their life. Medicine has a foot in science, and when I say science, I mean the method of observing, forming a hypothesis, and then testing. It's not about proving your point for the gratification of ego, or show your hypothesis reflects your superior thinking, or to use it as a narrative so you can sell something. The method of science is to keep us honest with ourselves. It gives us a way to stay humble in the presence of the mystery of life. Medicine, most assuredly, should have one foot firmly in science. But medicine is also art. It's a way of taking our own experience and expression and using that to engage the ever-changing present moment. It's a way to connect with another and ourselves that hopefully allows the practitioner to be of service and for the patient to access something in themselves that allows them to grow more vital. Sometimes growing more vital means adopting different lifestyle habits. Sometimes it means letting go of a belief that no longer serves. It might even mean recognizing that we will sicken and die if we're granted the good fortune of living long enough. What is more healing? The medication that keeps your feelings safely within the bounds of professional diagnostic parameters, or an experience that makes you question everything and leave you wildly open to possibilities that allow you to feel more acutely the discomforts of life, but with a deeper sense of gratitude and wonder? What if your present difficulty is an invitation to wake up and discover that you lived someone else's life, and for whatever moments you've got left, they can be more fully yours? I really thought that I'd know more at this point. I thought I'd be able to diagnose a patient by just having them walk into the room. I thought I'd have more capacity to pay attention to subtleties, a person's complexion, where they allow their breath to go, what their posture says about who they think themselves to be, or not. I thought I'd be sensitive enough to feel the story of a tissue, that I'd have read enough medicine, that I'd know what to do at the end of the patient interview and assessment. But often enough, all I know is start here. In a profession that focuses on the promise of easing suffering, it's easy to be hypnotized into imagining a proper end result for our patients, but that imagined solution might not be what they need. It might even be impossible to see the end from the beginning. It might be all we ever have is start here. The implicit agreement with medicine is that we're going to help our patients because we're going to, air quotes here, do something. But much like a fine woodworker will sit with a piece of wood for a while, study its grain, get a sense of its character, decide where and how to cut, not so much to bend the wood to his will, but to be able to bring out the uniqueness of the wood itself. So too, with medicine, we are looking to assist our patients in allowing parts of themselves to emerge. Our job is not to impress our ideas of well-being onto the people in our care, but rather to help them find the path that's right for them. These conversations come to you through the generous support of our sponsors and members. Blue Poppy, your new one-stop shop, has speedy shipping options on everything that you need for your clinic. It's Women's Health Month at Mayway Herbs. Check out their new website for learning resources on helping women with herbal medicine. Are you a creature of habit? How about making a change that helps your patients and the planet with AcuFast needles? And later in the show, raising your fees doesn't have to be a difficult process. Jane has helpful suggestions on making it easy and effective. And finally, have you considered that having a thriving, profitable practice is one of the most healing things that you can do? Julie Bear Don't Walk has, and she can help you do something about it too. Do be sure to visit the sponsors page on the Qiological website to take advantage of all the special offers our terrific sponsors have for listeners of the podcast. Picture this. Your clinic is buzzing with patients, and then you realize that you're down to your last box of needles. No need for panic, because Blue Poppy, your one-stop shop for all your acupuncture needs, they ship orders received before 3 p.m. on the same day. With a quick visit to Blue Poppy's website, you can order premium needles, herbal formulas, and that special Dr. Bob's oil that your patients love. Blue Poppy understands practitioners can't keep patients waiting. That's why they strive to get you what you need when you need it. From high-quality Chinese herbs and formulations to acupuncture supplies and clinical essentials, Blue Poppy has served practitioners for nearly 40 years with products that meet the highest of standards. Discover everything Blue Poppy has to offer by visiting www.bluepoppy.com, and don't forget to subscribe to their mailing list for exclusive offers and more.
Hi folks, I'm Yvonne Lyle, president of Mayway Herbs. May is Women's Health Month, and as a women-owned and women-run business, we especially love how Chinese medicine can support wellness through every stage of a woman's life. So in this month's newsletter and podcast, we're covering topics like PMS, pregnancy, menopause, and osteoporosis. We'll share expert insights and effective treatment strategies you can put to good use in your clinic. Our Plumflower brand line includes herbal tea pills, tablets, extract granules, and organic herbs, all of which you can find on Mayway.com, and where you can also find articles, videos, and other resources to support your practice. Since 1969, Mayway has been a trusted source for high-quality herbal products. In these challenging times, please know that we remain committed to keeping our products accessible and affordable so you can take care of yourself and your patients. As always, thank you for supporting Real Chinese Medicine.
Daily habits and routines feel comforting, familiar, easy, automatic. That's the power of repetition. You've worked out the kinks and can do it with your eyes closed. But what if you shook things up? What if you ditched the old routine and tried something new? Hi, I'm John Sten. I've practiced acupuncture for over 30 years, and together with my wife Kelly, we created the world's first eco-friendly acupuncture needle. The AcuFast earth-friendly needle system cuts your packaging waste by 60 to 90%, depending upon your needle type, speeds up your needling, gives you more control, and best of all, while you're healing patients, we plant a tree for every 2 boxes your clinic uses. Thousands of acupuncturists have already made the switch. In just the last year, they've helped plant over 16,000 trees. Since we started, that number has grown to over 50,000. So break the routine. Be the change. Visit acufastneedles.com. Your patients and the planet will thank you.
In this conversation with Zoe Brenner, we explore the world of subtle touch and sensing, how our patients hire us, not just for our skill and knowledge, but also for our restraint and capacity to recognize that more does not mean better. Being able to digest and integrate a treatment is essential. And overtreatment can be a problem because it overwhelms an already overloaded system. Not surprisingly, I thoroughly enjoy a conversation with folks who lead with their curiosity and are ever wondering what's up around the bend ahead. Zoe has engaged the practice of acupuncture for the far side of 40 years now, and it's a delight to have a conversation with a seasoned practitioner who is as enthusiastic for learning as a fresh graduate. let's get into this. Zoe Brenner, welcome to Geological.
Thanks. Nice to be here.
Really delighted to have you here. You've shown up regularly in a number of Geological live events, and after a while you start noticing people, they show up a little bit more. It's like, oh, there's that Zoe Brenner again. Yeah, there's Zoe Brenner. Man, she shows up a lot for this. And then we somehow got to talking before one of them. I can't remember what it was. But the thing that I remember is that you have been at acupuncture for a really long time. And like long enough that it brings up the question, like, what's a nice girl like you doing with acupuncture? Given, now, what year did you find this, and how on God's green earth did you wind your way into it?
Well, it was around 1975 that I started, and I had a treatment, and I was so impressed that I felt so different that I went to a introductory lecture, and they were interviewing people to go off to England to study, and we get everyone, and I said, "No, you didn't get me." And the guy said to me, "I didn't know you were interested." It's the first interview I ever did that I wasn't nervous for because I did it on the spot.
You didn't know you were being interviewed.
And so I went off to England a few months later, and that was the beginning.
Wow, that's extraordinary. So quick. So in 1975, how do you even find an acupuncturist? And why would you even go to one? How old were you, if I may ask, when that happened?
I was 25.
Oh, you were 25.
Yeah. Yeah, I was having difficult situation with work and personal, and I had menstrual cramps, and I went for acupuncture, and I came out and I felt like singing, and I never sing.
I felt like singing and I never sing. Okay, that would get my attention.
Yeah, it did.
Yeah.
I was trying to figure out what I was gonna do next in my life, and that popped up, and who knew at that point, when I made that decision, that 46 years later, I'd still be doing this. I would never have expected that of myself. But I found so many nooks and crannies and challenges and those kinds of things, and things that just interest me and excite me that I have never stopped.
Yeah. Well, there's a lifetime of inquiry that goes into the work that we do. No doubt about that.
Mhm.
If you're not up for lifelong learning, don't do this. That's for sure.
Yeah.
So nooks and crannies. Tell us about some of those nooks and crannies and places where you've been that were surprising to you.
Well, in a way, I probably have a different start than a lot of people because I started with 5 Element. I started studying with Worsley, who got me interested because what was around at the time was pretty boring, was lists of symptoms.
Did we even have acupuncture schools in the United States at that point? 1975.
Yeah, the school started in 75 or 76. I think NISA had started before that or right around the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And the school in Columbia started right around then. Actually, the school hadn't started. They had started a clinic in order to get a school because I had to go to England to study, and I think for several years you had to go to England to study. So he got me interested,
Mm-hmm.
and then I stayed around for a couple of years with that. Then I got involved with Elizabeth. So I didn't start with TCM.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it was different. And then I got involved with Elizabeth Rocha and Father Lar. And through the school, I met them through the school. They became very close friends. And I studied with them for many years. So I was studying Chinese classics.
With some real heavy hitters of Chinese classics.
Yeah, yeah. So that's what I mean, kind of nooks and crannies. Actually, I asked Per Lar once why he started studying Chinese, because he was in Vietnam during the Vietnam War, actually, and came back and did a doctorate in Chinese at the Sorbonne. But I asked him why he started, because he was a Catholic priest and sort of an odd thing. He said, because we have a saying in French that if you're odd, you're Chinese. In other words, he knew he was an outlier. So he started to, and that was sort of, a little bit of my approach was because I started in anthropology and was interested in other cultures. So it gave me a different worldview than our normal worldview. And like you said, heavy hitters. So it wasn't just translations, they were like digging into what do these really mean
Yes.
and how you swivel around in meanings of characters. So that was my beginning. That was probably 40 years ago that I started with that. So that's how I learned Chinese medicine.
Yeah, so that's how you learn Chinese medicine. I want to stick a pin in that because I want to come back to it. I really appreciate hearing about Father Lar. And, well, I'm weird. I'm kind of odd. So what do you do with that? You double down on it. That's what you do with it. I think there's really something to that.
Yeah.
I think about last night I was hanging out with a friend. Oh my God. We were going over stems and branches. He's been studying this much longer than I have. And we've had some conversations around it for the past year or so. And I almost understand what he's talking about. And all I can get is, yeah, that's really cool, but I don't really know what you're talking about. But we keep coming back to it. Last night we're hanging out and I'm starting to get it after listening to Deborah Wolf a little bit. It's like I actually had a way of holding up my end of the conversation. I get to the end of that conversation. We had a great time. Get to the end, hang up, and I'm thinking, we are so geeky. We're just geeks. And I remember being in high school, being kind of a geeky kid, and it was the last damn thing that you wanted to be. So I really appreciate that idea, and I think it's right. Like, what's the thing that you're kind of weird about? Well, good, go do more of that. Because it might take you somewhere interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anthropology, what a great foundation to have when you're, I was going to say doing medicine, but like working with other people. Because even though we all come from the same, or we might come from the same culture, even the same city, and we think we know each other, we live in such different worlds.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
And there's something about anthropology that trains you to observe what you're doing.
You're observing yourself.
Yeah, observe how you are interpreting what's going on.
Oh.
And it's funny because back then I didn't know what I was going to do with anthropology, and I actually didn't go to graduate school, much to my father's chagrin. It was a time when when schools were being tear gassed and all sorts of things, and I didn't know what I would do with anthropology except get a position in a university if you could. So I started wandering around doing other things like training in bodywork psychotherapy and massage and so on. Then I encountered acupuncture, but I lost my train of thought. Oh, but then all of a sudden I realized that there are a lot of acupuncturists that have become anthropologists, like Volker Scheid,
Yes.
and then you have the anthropologists like Elizabeth Shue and all these people who it became the subject of the anthropology, and medical historians are somewhat anthropologists. So suddenly I'm back in the same milieu.
Isn't that funny?
Yeah.
How we can have something and it calls to us, maybe it goes dormant or it just rides along, just waiting.
Yeah.
To have a chance to flourish. The thing that you mentioned, though, I want to come back to this for just a second, that as an anthropologist, there's a way that you're trained where you're attending to other cultures, but you're also attending to your own attending.
Yes.
That seems really helpful.
Yes.
For any clinician, period, regardless of what kind of medicine you practice.
No, I think it's true. You're observing how you're observing. And it does make a difference. And also, If you sink into the subject and you're just doing it, you lose perspective on what the nature of what you're doing is. And I think a lot of people do that with acupuncture. You just think it's this thing that you do and you just take it on wholeheartedly. But there's another part of me that's always going, what is this really about? Why would I think that way? An observation of it. And I think that's helpful.
Yeah, I'm thinking about my own experience in clinic over the years. Especially early on, I would do everything I could to try to make a diagnosis line up with how I was thinking so I could feel okay about my thinking and feel confident about my diagnosis. Really, what I was doing was leaning on my confirmation bias.
Mhm.
And sometime later, realized, it might be more helpful if instead of thinking this is what I think it is, can I make a good argument for it not being the case? And what else would I see? But it took some time in the boat and a sense of some kind of confidence before I could challenge my own thinking as I was working with people.
Mhm.
I think I did not serve my early patients all that well because too often I was trying to make it right instead of trying to see what was actually there.
That's what I think is crucial. Even after all these years, I still think that part is really crucial about practicing, is not imposing your ideas on the person that you're confronted with, that you be as clear that you're just observing them and hearing, feeling, smelling, whatever, getting the information that they are giving you without you putting any pressure on them, without you imposing yourself.
Mm-hmm.
That is one of the most crucial things about practice. I'm going to skip way ahead because what I discovered 20 years ago, or 22, 23 years ago, was Japanese meridian therapy, which sort of brought me back to the five phase again.
Mm-hmm.
But specifically Toyohari practice, which has a lot of skill training in practice, needling and palpating and so on. And that we spend a lot of time making sure we're not imposing ourselves. Like if you're feeling for a point and you're too heavy in your palpation, it makes the person's pulse sink. When you lighten up and you just feel where there's an opening to needle, it the pulse comes alive. And even when I'm teaching, I find that when students go to do a diagnosis on patients and they have too much in their mind about what they're going to see, that it confuses the picture. I have to take the person's pulse before anyone touches them so that I don't feel all this conflicting information coming because they've impressed their idea of who that patient is on them rather than allowing it to emerge.
That is delicate, delicate work.
Well, this has been for the last 20 or so years, like I said, this has really taken over my life. And I'm so excited to practice this way because I'm always learning from touching and feeling and sensing what's going on with people. And you have to allow them to emerge. And you can tell the difference. I threw you a curveball there.
No, not at all. Not at all. There's a couple things I want to touch on. I was just taking a few notes.
Uh-huh.
I love curveballs. Actually, I don't play baseball. But curveballs are kind of fun, right? They move weird. So, yeah, curveballs are fine. The phrase, allow them to emerge, allow the patient to emerge. I want to dig into some of this because I got some questions around that. First, I want to say, in large part, thanks to what I've learned from Nick Pohl with his clean language, I've learned a bit through language and presence to allow my patients to emerge in clinic. And how do I do that? How's that happen? What happens is Instead of me having a good idea for the patient and telling them, I listen for the patients having a good idea what might be good for them and letting that emerge and maybe reflecting it back and leaving it at that.
It usually works better.
It works way better. No one likes to be told what to do, first of all.
Yeah.
I still have a rebellious teenager in me. It's like, don't tell me what to do. I go to a yoga class. People on the podcast have heard me say this, but it's so true. I go to a yoga class and someone says, take a nice deep cleansing breath. And my first thought is, shut up. You don't tell me what to do. But I've got that, okay? So I can appreciate not wanting to be told what to do. And I love the process of discovery. How many times have any of us thought we were being helpful by giving our patients some nice, healthy advice that never gets followed?
Yeah.
Because no one's even looking for it. That's a very coarse example. But even something as simple as, I think I know what might be good for you and I'm going to try to do something to make that happen, might even be too much as well. So I want to come around to this thing. I've talked to a lot of people about this because I'm still really noodling on it. I don't understand it, even though I talk to lots of people about it. Intention. I hear people talk about intention. And I feel like I need to be careful with intention because I do want my patients to get better. And I want my work to be helpful. But I worry about laying something on them that's not theirs.
Okay.
So I'd love to get your take on intention because I feel like I might just be too afferent with it. Do my hopes get in the way of them getting better, I think is what I'm saying.
Well, the way I look at it or the way I practice is my job is to find out where they are. If they're sunk into themselves, then I approach them at a deeper level and meet them there. Or, for instance, if their pulse is very fast, then I do a fast technique because it matches their energy. But my intention is not about what should happen. It's where intention comes in is a little bit different, but it's just meeting them where they are. And I don't try and make something happen. I try to touch them with awareness and allow it to go where it goes. The intention comes if someone's energy is very deep, if their pulse is deep in them. I do mostly non-insertive needling. And so I approach the needle with the needle thinking about going deep to meet them. And it's mostly with intention with my mind rather than actually putting the needle deep into them. So I keep going until I feel like I'm in the chi. That's the extent of the intention.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just meeting them there and then they take it where they go. It's about awareness on very deep level of being met so that you're freed up to be who you are and heal yourself. But the intention of, oh, I want this to happen is I don't approach people that way.
Yeah. Thank you. I've asked a lot of people about this lately because I'm puzzling through it.
Yeah.
And intention to meet them where they are, whether that's deep, whether that's fast, whatever. Meet them where they are, touch the chi. That's it.
Yeah. That's it.
That's it.
It requires also finding out where they are. I mean, observing. It's like the beginning of my study, I was reading these things in the classic that said the superior practitioner looks at the person and knows what's going on. And the inferior practitioner has to palpate them and do this and that and make things happen. And so I've had to approach it. How do you become a superior practitioner is by self-cultivation and by being able to observe what is being presented to you and then just meet it where it is, not where it needs to go. Sometimes the finding out what it is realizing that something's not there that should be, that they're not expressing, something's missing. but it's still meeting them where they are.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden it opens.
I love that. I learned years ago. This episode is brought to you by Jane, the clinic management software that honestly just makes running a practice easier. Let's dive into something that's never easy, but sometimes necessary: raising your fees. It can feel awkward, right? But here's a tip that can really help. Consider offering flexibility to your patients as you introduce the change. When patients face new fees, it's natural for them to feel uncertain or concerned. That's where flexibility can really make a difference. Offering options like a phased increase, suggesting a payment plan, or even taking a moment to talk things through can help to ease the transition. These thoughtful gestures show your patients that you're listening and care about them, which strengthens the trust you've worked so hard to build. If you're looking for more ideas on how to navigate these kinds of changes, head to frontdesk.jane.app and check out the article, How to Tell Clients You're Raising Your Fees. One last thing, if you're ready to give Jane a try, you can use the code CHEOLOGICAL for a 1-month grace period on your new Jane account. Gosh, so many lessons are just hard won.
Yes.
They are so hard won. And I remember at one point coming home from work, like every dang night, and I was just exhausted. I was just played out. And I began to realize that I was putting too much into the work with my patients. I didn't know how I was doing it, but just like, man, I can't keep doing this. I'm not sure what it is I'm doing, but I need to stop doing it. So, okay, there's a good conundrum to work on. This is at a very gross level. So I'm just putting this out there so all y'all's listening, maybe you've noticed this too, because what you're talking about is a big refinement. But I found that there were patients who, it was like they were bringing maybe 15% of themselves forward. And I would go to meet them, I would make up the other 85%. And that made me exhausted. And they never came further forward. In fact, they'd draw back because they were comfortable having that space. Or maybe they could only bring themselves out to a certain degree. If I brought myself out more with my attention, my energy, whatever, it never, ever, ever helped. But what I found was if they came forward with what I'm going to call 15%, and I show up with 20-ish%, I'm here, I'm present, energetic match, like you were talking about with the pulse, fast pulse, fast method. I would meet them with that kind of energetic match. I didn't get tired after that.
Yeah. Isn't that amazing?
And I think my work was better. At this point, I know my work is better. And so when I hear you say, meet people where they are, I mean, really meet them. Like, really meet them.
Yeah.
Just where they are. Not a couple steps back, not a couple steps forward. If you can meet them where they are, there is something, I was about to say, that really moves the chi, but no, it's not that it moves the chi. Something else happens with the chi, but I don't think I have a word for it. Do you?
No. I've struggled with it. I talk about awareness, but that's not a big enough word. But what I was saying about if their pulse is fast and you do a fast technique, what surprisingly happens is their pulse slows down. And it's not because I tried to make it slow down. It's just because I touched them where they were. And I don't know. It's probably the old Taoist stories of the person goes to a community where there's a drought and he sits and meditates, and when he's okay, it starts raining. Kind of thing is like he didn't try and make it rain. He just got in touch with what is there. And because of his own cultivation, it opened the heavens. Now, I can't do that. But
Oh, no.
on my little level of just trying to be present with them, it opens something up. It's really quite amazing.
I hear you talk about it. We're in the middle of a conversation about it, and I recognize that there are those moments that arise. You just know them.
Yeah.
They go through you in a way. I find my entire physiology just kind of softens. My breath goes deeper, I think. I don't know. I haven't paid attention to it. I suspect it does. And like so many things, Zoe, it's simple.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean it's easy.
Exactly. I'm drawn to something that's more simple in a way, theoretically. I don't like lots of techniques and all sorts of point combinations, and that I'm not drawn to at all. But doing it simply takes a lot of preparation in yourself to be able to touch those places. Well, it's simple in the sense that it's not all these complicated bits and pieces, but being prepared to be there, to be present.
How do you prepare yourself for that?
Well, some of it is the training in Toyohari is we're coaching each other on what we're doing in the process of needling. And like I said, you can feel the pulse sink because you're putting too much pressure or too much intention on them. And I remember years ago when I started in Toyohari, one of the most wonderful practitioners, Yanagishita Sensei, was in Washington teaching. And I was in a small group, and a person was going to needle. I don't remember. It was spleen 6 or something. I don't remember what point it was, but it was on the leg. And Yanagishita Sensei was blind. He passed away a few years ago, but he was blind, so he couldn't see anything. He was feeling the pulse. And he told the guy, well, you're not on the point. And he kept trying to find it. So he came over and showed him where the point was with his hand. And he said, okay, now you're on it and go ahead. And he said to him, you're looking at the point too hard. You've made the pulse sink. And so he had him stand up. And it was an amazing experience to watch him do that because he couldn't see the guy. He couldn't see that he was all bent over on top of the point, but he could feel that that's what he was doing.
You're looking at it too hard. Okay.
Yeah.
I am guilty on multiple accounts so much of the time of looking too hard. I get it. I hear you say it, and it's like, yep, I know what that feels like.
Yeah.
Then the thoughts start to go through my mind like, well, I better do a few extra points here to cover my bases. And it's like, nope, now you're really lost.
Yeah.
Forget it. Like stop, like full stop, start over.
Yeah.
I remember something that Chip Chase said.
Yes.
I had some delightful classes with him.
Yes.
On engaging vitality. I miss him.
Yes.
And he would talk to us. We were doing a class on fluids. Quiet, listen, there's a fluids. It's like, you can look at them. Don't look directly. Don't look too directly. It's like you can look out of the corner of your eye. It's okay to look. Don't stare. Like glimpse.
Mm-hmm.
Don't look too hard. And, there's just some things that a teacher will say at a certain moment, and it just never leaves me.
Mm-hmm.
I think about that all the time. Don't look too hard. Which, the meaning I take from that is, Michael Max, you're looking a little hard. Like, back off a little. Relax.
That's where you're trying to make something happen with your effort.
Yes. Well, someone's paying me to do something.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you a great story about paying you to do something. I had a patient, someone brought me this woman because she was so sensitive. She kept reacting to everything she did. And I was her teacher, and she thought maybe I could handle her. So she turned her over to me eventually. And she only wanted one point in the treatment. She drove 45 minutes to get to my office. She wanted one point. And so I was okay with it. After a few treatments, I said, I'd like to do a second point. And she said, well, I don't know. And then she finally let me do it. And she called me from the car when she left, and she said, no, I should have told you just that one point that was enough. She knew what she needed.
Mm-hmm.
And she came back for the next treatment and she said, listen, I pay you for your restraint.
Oh.
And that has never
Oh.
left me because, you know, it is really hard to hold yourself back. You want to do something else. And in this case, it was just to do an extra point because I thought it would balance things a little more. And she said, I'm paying you for your restraint. And I thought that's really important to realize.
Wow.
Isn't that great?
Yes, it is. And thank you, because your voice will follow me into clinic when I'm thinking, oh, how about this one more thing?
Yeah.
Or if I'm just looking too hard, I'm paying for your restraint. I'm paying you to give me exactly enough. I talk to my patients about this all the time because being Americans as we is,
Mm.
you know, more is gooder. Like, doc,
Yeah.
fill me up with
Yeah.
needles, more is gooder. And people seem to think that. And we all like a good thing, and usually a little bit more of it than's good for us, but that's just the world that we live in. And so I'm constantly talking to my patients, and I remind them, you know, as children, that they either read or probably had read to them the famous classic of enoughness. And they look at me like, no, I don't know that Chinese book, The Classic of Enoughness. No, what? What are you talking about? And then I tell them, well, of course you read Goldilocks and the Three Bears, didn't you? And I think about that all the time, that too much is not helpful.
Exactly.
Not enough is not helpful. Just right is what you're looking for. And what is just right? Well, this is the beauty of the medicine we practice. It's different for everybody and at different times.
Exactly. Exactly.
And so we're paid for our restraint.
Yeah. It's being present to what is happening. When I find myself thinking, well, what can I do now? Then I know it's time to stop because if I'm looking for something to do, that is a bad sign.
Love it. That's it right there. I love it. Thank you. How do I know I'm done? I'm looking for something else to do. Oh, yeah, you're done.
I mean, it's a certain kind of looking for something. If it's okay, it's not quite finished, that's a different thing. But yeah, if I'm looking something to do, I'm going past what needs to be done.
Overtreatment. I hear the engaging vitality people talk about this all the time.
Yeah, we did too.
Overtreatment is a real thing, and it happens a lot. In fact, I would say so much, I'm looking at my own experience here, that I've had people come back and either it didn't help or maybe they got worse. It's not because I didn't use enough needles. It's not because I didn't do enough. It's because I did too much.
Too much, right. I get a lot of patients that come from other practitioners, and it's clear what's happened is that it's a sensitive person and they've been overtreated, and they start bouncing around. I mean, their energy is just overstimulated and bouncing around, or it's just too much for them to integrate. I tell my patients it's like you have a tower of cards and you keep trying to go up higher and higher, and you put that last card on and the whole thing falls down. So you want to stop before you get there.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's always a little heart sinking. This one more needle and you put it in and you go and you check the pulse. It's like, blew
It's
the
too much.
tires out.
Yeah. So I approach it from the underside. I'd rather be underperforming to see what the body can do themselves.
Mm.
And I tend to get a lot of sensitive patients. And people who are sensitive have a hard time in biomedicine as well. And they go into the doctor and they say, I have this and that and the other thing. Doctor overtreats them and they start having reactions to the medication. But it happens in acupuncture too.
Yes.
It does.
I remember hearing, maybe in acupuncture school, certainly as a novice practitioner, about how acupuncture is harmonizing and you can't really hurt people with it, and you can help, but you can't really hurt. And no, actually, that's wrong.
That's true. From a malpractice standpoint, it's hard to hurt people. I mean, you have to stick needles in bad places and stuff like that. But can you make someone have a bad reaction? Yes, you
Yes.
can. And overtreatment is one of the worst ways.
You mentioned people bouncing around. Their energy is, they can't integrate it. What are some other signs that you notice with people that are overtreated? And then what do you do about that? Because I guess they're just paying for your restraint then.
Sometimes it's because people are treating too many things. I'm going to do this and that and the other thing to this person. And when I tell patients about this, sometimes I say, if I suggest you do one task, you might do it very well, or even two. But if I tell you to do 10 different things, yeah, you're going to have a really hard time with that. And you're not going to know where to focus and how to sort it out. And that, or they're overstimulated. Their energies, they can't integrate the amount of force you're putting in. And I try not to be putting in force. I try to meet them where they are. And it's a gentle kind of tonification rather than like really stimulating or really dispersing. That we don't trust that the system can do it with an easy, but acupuncture is something that you can do very easy touches and it makes a difference. Go back and read Ling Shu 1.
If you're paying attention and if you know how to use your attention.
And these are people often that are very sensitive. I read this very exciting piece in Li Hong's book, Classical Chinese Medicine.
Mm-hmm.
It's a wonderful book. I really enjoyed it, but I got so excited when he started talking about the heart, and it's in Su Wen 74. And he said, all pain that of sores and itches and sores relate to the heart. And then he had this interpretation that the heart is in charge of these, where you're feeling things all over. Little pains and itches and sores, not like a major this or that. You're feeling it all over the place. And I went, oh my God, I have all these patients who have all these niggly things that are making them miserable. And, looking from the outside, you go, well, why should you care that you lose a dime's worth of liquid from when you step off a curve? I mean, it's not that big a deal. Or your little finger hurts when you press really hard on something or whatever. But they'll have a whole bunch of those things. And it's usually because they're fairly anxious, but their awareness is everywhere. And I went, oh my God, that's the heart. And so I started incorporating it in my treatment protocol, that I look at treating the heart, which is not so commonly done in Japanese acupuncture. But when I recognized what that was in people, I thought, this is fantastic. I mean, I had never seen that as a heart symptom. So he opened that door. Now, the opposite is true too. There are people that are so unaware of everything, they don't even notice the things that are going on, which is also the heart, because it's the opposite. Not getting the signals from all over their body that are telling them what's happening. But I have a whole bunch of patients over the years that have been these people who are paying too much attention to too many things. I mean, I'm not trying to treat all those things. I'm trying to find the pattern that's behind it. But I had never seen that as being the heart.
And now you do.
Now I do. And it helps. It helps tremendously. That's wonderful. It's like you keep learning.
Yes.
Someone says something, that one little bit in that book. I mean, there are other things that are great in the book, but I just got so excited about it because I thought, these are people I'm puzzling with all the time.
Yes.
And those are the people that get overtreated when they go to places where people are trying to plug all those holes.
And so they get 26 needles and now the body doesn't know what to do.
Yeah, you've actually exacerbated their awareness of all of those things.
Mm-hmm.
And those are the kinds of people that very often get overtreated, both by Western medicine and by acupuncture because people are trying to address all of the problems. And the real problem is that they may be anxious, but they're over focused on. I was talking to a psychiatrist patient and I was describing this, and he said they're hypochondriacal. And, and I thought, well, that's the way to say it, but I wouldn't say that. But it's also a kind of, I don't know, just focused on things that don't need to be focused on.
Yes, we all have that patient after we've done the intake, and then you say, well, is there anything else? Well, I got this little thing here on my finger. And then sometimes when I'm eating, there'll be this little sound that comes out of my left ear.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. And you go,
Yeah, so bringing that back to the heart and over extension of awareness into places where it doesn't really serve the person. Now, if you go putting a bunch of needles in, now what you've done is given the body even more things to think about and wonder about and worry about and attend to. Maybe with someone like that, something really simple, like one thing.
well, also looking at the pattern in meridian therapy where you're treating 5 phases, it often would include the spleen with the heart. And the spleen has a function also, as Leo Lee Hung brought out, of sorting out what is important to focus on and what isn't.
Right.
And so that the two of those together is really healing for these people rather than chasing their symptoms everywhere or getting so frustrated because they have too many things going on.
Their Shen is scattered and their E can't focus.
Yeah, it can't sort out what's really crucial and what's not. That hangnail is not the most crucial thing in your life, but the fact that you're aggravated by it, that you're really disturbed by it, is important. And but those are people that I see that do get overtreated in any kind of medicine.
Yes. Well, I would think with your particular perspective, your sensitivities that you've cultivated over time, the awarenesses that it brings you in the clinic, that you are very respectful of your patients. You want to meet them where they are. You don't want to lay your concepts on them. You don't want to ask them to be anything other than who they are. Yes, I would suspect that sensitive people would search you out. You would be trustworthy.
Yeah.
That where other practitioners, even with the best of intentions, maybe wouldn't be so helpful.
Yeah, well, I'm sure I have that possibility as well. There are people that you miss, that you don't quite get what's going on.
Well, there's that. I mean, we all have that, but yeah, it's that thing. And you hear, anyone who's been in practice for any length of time knows that there's certain kinds of people that come to them, and there's certain kinds of people that they kind of get them, they can work with them, and there's other kinds of people it's not a great fit.
Yeah.
I used to think I could treat anybody for anything. Chinese medicine, awesome. We can use this to treat anybody. We can treat anything. I can't wait. I found out that there are some things I just really can't treat. And there's some kinds of people, I'm just not good with them. For whatever reason,
Yeah.
not my tribe. There's other people that I know are much better in helping them.
Yeah. No. Recognizing that is really important too. And I was talking to someone a couple of weeks ago about case histories, and she was saying how we really need more case histories in our medicine. And I think it's true. I mean, my own case histories from my own practice, as well as from others, is where you haven't solved the problem and you have to work through it somehow. You have to find what you're not getting. And that's, really a learning, is admitting that you missed it. And how do I step back and rethink it if you can, or send them on to someone else, as you were just saying?
That would be a great topic, if we dare, for a podcast conversation. Great failures I have not yet figured out. Because I remember going to school, and in the very first week, what I heard from my teachers were stories of how they thought a treatment was going well, but it didn't. Ooh, very unexpected adverse reactions. I tried this, I tried that, it went like this, da da da. In the end, there's salvation. But yeah, what about those cases where we haven't worked it all the way through? It's like great failures I haven't figured out yet. There's a lot in there.
That one's harder. That one's harder.
It is harder.
But I was in a book that was published, I don't remember how many years ago, Acupuncture in Practice.
Yes, that's a great book.
Yeah, that I was asked to do a chapter in that book. They specifically said you have to do a case that you had a problem and you had to solve it. And they said, Ted Kapchuk is a good friend of mine, was one of the co-editors of it. And he said they had the hardest time getting people to put up cases that they hadn't solved. Not that they hadn't ever solved, but that they hadn't solved and had to work through admitting failure. And unfortunately, that's how we learn.
We can also learn from the things that go well. It is possible to learn that way.
Yeah.
But there's something about working through those places where we don't know yet. And you go through that kind of liminal space of, I don't even know where to stand. I have to start again, or my thinking might be totally off.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, the real challenge is, God, I thought I'm supposed to know this stuff by now. I mean, this is a double-edged sword, and both of them are okay. I would say at this point, both those edges of the sword are okay. It's great to be able to get it and know it. I think increasingly I am more comfortable with, I don't know what we're looking at. In fact, I had an interview today with a patient. I haven't seen this person in ages. He lives in another town. His son is having some issues. And so we had a little video chat. And man, what a story. I'm not going to go into it other than to say, wow. No wonder everybody's confused about what's going on with this kid. And no wonder he's having a rough go, because it's a really difficult case. And they've seen all kinds of doctors. I mean, we've all had these kind of patients, right?
Mm-hmm.
But they were asking me, what do you do with this? Have you got some ideas, Michael Max? I said, well, in a case like this, sometimes I have ideas, sometimes I don't. But here's what I know. When it's complicated like this, it takes some time. And the way that I begin is I look at what I think I might know. I look at what I know for sure I don't know. And then I look at the weird contradictions and just hang out with them and see what comes up over time. And if you're okay with working that way, I'm happy to work with you. And I think there's something about being able to say, I'm not sure, in an honest way, that often will bring a huge amount of trust from your patients, because they've already seen 15 other doctors who said they knew, but they didn't.
Well, it's always a good sign I don't mean good in beneficial, a sign that they've seen so many people and they haven't solved the problem, that this is not an easy problem.
Mm-hmm.
That someone would have gotten to the bottom of it. And so it's telling you already that it's hard. One of my things is that I've gotten over the years is when it's really complex, I have to go even simpler.
Mm-hmm.
That I have to try and find some central core in the midst of all that complexity to address, and then you see what happens or doesn't. But if you treat a bunch of different things, it gets, so I say to people, when it's really complex, I go really simple.
Uh-huh.
Because then I can start to sort out what reactions are happening.
Having a thriving, profitable practice is one of the most healing things you can do as a healthcare practitioner. because a robust business is the ultimate expression of vital qi. And that's the heart of our medicine. I'm Julie Bairdontlock, and I help practitioners grow nourishing, profitable, authentic businesses that embody the generative cycle of Chinese medicine. This isn't about all yang all the time. It's about expanding your own internal capacity, growing collaborative relationships with your patients for ethical patient retention, and marketing as an extension of this medicine, not a necessary evil. You already know that everything is connected in your patients' lives and bodies. The same is true for your business. When we align your systems, your schedule, your pricing, and your offerings with you, we create flow, which means more spaciousness, more impact, and more joy. When you are in the flow, fully resourced in terms of chi, time, and money, your business becomes a source of healing, not just for your patients, but for you. Let's grow something rooted, radiant, and real. Visit lifeflowconsulting.com to learn more.
All right. So in the Chinese medicine world, we can call that Zoe's razor.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's the first thing that comes to my mind. Okay, what's the simplest place I can go here? And then see how to respond. But also, I get because I do so much palpation now in the world of COVID. When I couldn't, I get confused if I can't touch someone.
Mm-hmm.
I get so much information from touching that it's hard for me to orient myself without having some sense of touching.
So that capacity that you have for sensing
Mhm.
is fundamental to how you work.
Yeah, yeah, it is now. I had a patient the other day. I saw her the first time a week or so ago, and she had back pain, and she was really miserable. And there were so many confusing things about what she was saying, and it was happening this way and that way and so on. And I was lost, and I found what I wanted to treat. And she came back, and when I was palpating her back, I thought, this is not in the tissue. And she had gone to one doctor said she had a herniated disc, and another doctor said she had a trapped nerve in her pelvis. And they were coming, and nobody was helping her for 6 months. And I was trying to get a sense of what was going on. And when I touched her, I went, this is not in the physical tissue. I could just not feel it there. I mean, it was a little bit off, but the tissue was not so much a problem. And I thought, okay, there's something emotional going on. And she did not go there at all when I interviewed her, and in the beginning or even the second treatment. And I treated her on HeartMaster, on pericardium. One point, along with the other points, I was doing some other things. And she got up, she sat up, and she said, could this have to do with depression? And she started crying. And she went through so many Kleenex. And then she was talking about her parents dying one after another in the same year. And it was amazing. I didn't say a word to her about the emotional, but just touching that, just doing pericardium 7 on her as part of the treatment, it gave her permission to let all that out. And she said, but you're going to tell me this is all in my mind. And I said, no, it's obviously not. You're having body pain. That's why she didn't mention it to me. She didn't want me to dismiss her as it being emotional. But as soon as I touched her there and gave her permission to enter that space, she just
There it was. Yes. So I've had more than one person talk about acupuncture as a conversation. And this is one of the reasons why I really love this work.
Yeah.
Because like this patient of yours, she could go to a psychotherapist and maybe do, some talking work, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Or come to see you, you're having a conversation with what you sense and the needles that you put in. You're asking a question.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, might be something here emotionally. I realize as we're having this conversation, I usually put a needle in because I think it's an answer. But now I'm wondering what would happen if I work in such a way that I put in a needle and have the needle be a question
Yeah.
instead of an answer. It sounds like you put in a needle into pericardium 7 as kind of a question. Could there be some emotional thing that could use some help?
Mhm.
Yes.
The
And
answer was
the answer was
absolutely.
absolutely. And let me tell you all about it. Have you got another Kleenex, please? And I love that about the capacity of acupuncture and the capacity that we have to be with people where you don't have to, I'm using air quotes here, go there. We just are there with them. And this winds right back to the beginning of our conversation
Mhm.
about your perspective is to meet them just where they are.
And in that case, she didn't tell me that,
She didn't need to.
but I could feel it being missing
Right.
because it wasn't in the tissue, so I knew it was missing. And so I met her where the missing piece was.
That's right. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. It's so exciting. I love doing this work. That's why I've been doing it for so long.
I had plenty of different jobs and a couple careers before I came to Chinese medicine. I've never stuck at something unless it's been able to keep my attention. And yeah, I've got at least a lifetime or two that I could play with this stuff. Never boring, always interesting.
That's why, like I said, when I made the decision to study acupuncture years ago, I never would have thought that I was the kind of person that would stick with something like that. And here I am all these years later.
Yeah, and quite a journey. So something I do want to come back to, there's a couple things here. I know we've been at this a little bit, and I'm just going to ask for a little bit more of your time.
Mhm.
You were talking about early on, you were doing this classic study with Elizabeth and Father Lar. You were studying classics. You weren't really studying technique. You weren't studying therapeutics. You were studying ancient, classical, philosophical, medical, ancient science, and philosophy. How did that imbue your work at that time?
By opening me up to observing. Chinese cosmology is about observing the universe, and it teaches you how to see those things in the universe and how they are in us. And I know people used to say, well, it's not very practical. And I thought, God, it changes my practice. It does. I could see it was changing my practice, what I observed and so on. But then, I mean, I mentioned Ling Shu 1, which this last year I've read through twice. And I don't know if you ever read Chip article with Dan Bensky. Actually, it was 2 parts that was in the Lantern. Did you read that?
I've read it several times, and it's one of those things it's worth coming back to from time to time.
Yeah, well, like I said, I've read it twice in Chinese in the last year. Once with Sabina Wilms and the other with Elizabeth Rocha.
Oh, you're reading it in Chinese with Sabina.
Yes.
You have drunken the Kool-Aid.
But it's about needle technique in an extremely amazing way, being able to go into the stillness and the openness to touch the place that everything triggers off of. G is the word for trigger, but it also means a place where something shoots from, and it's in the middle of a empty space where that is. And that's what you're trying to touch with the needle.
The middle of the empty space.
So talk about technique. It's there in the Ling Shu. Well, Ling Shu is about the point,
Yeah.
about the axis of the spirit, of the efficacy of the spirit. So it is in those texts, but you have to look for it and not just skim over it.
You do have to look. And I think there's something, if you know a modicum of Chinese, you don't need to know a lot of Chinese to read Chinese medicine. It's a fairly limited vocabulary. Sometimes the Chinese and seeing it in Chinese and thinking about it in Chinese and entering it through that doorway, so to speak, you'll see other things.
Yes, exactly. It's very rich. It's very rich. And it has informed me for all these years in so many ways. Now I'm starting to study Taoism from a practice standpoint. So that's different than from a scholarly standpoint. And we'll see where that takes me.
Practical Taoism.
Well, from a practice.
So what does that look like?
Well, learning Taoist practices like chanting and talismans and things like and the nature of healing. I don't even know. I'm just at the beginning of it. But it's another nook and cranny of my journey. They're not nooks and crannies, they're big highways.
They are big highways. They're like rivers. And I think I've gotten hooked into the stems and branches here recently.
Uh-huh.
Not at all that I understand it, but that I might be able to understand it. I feel at this point like I might be able to understand it if I work at it.
Yeah.
I might be able to understand. I have this sense that it's like, oh, this is like the source code of our medicine. If I can understand the source code, maybe that'll give me another way of working with points and people and perception and
Right.
everything else. I don't know. I'm just at that very beginning place, and I feel like there might be something here.
Yeah. I find things like that, little avenues that I know if I can really feel what that's about, that it might give me a big opening to some other understandings, like the quote from Liu Li Hong.
Yes.
That was, I need to go read the book again. Yeah, if there are other things in there that spur me off like that did.
It's quite likely that had you read that 10 years prior, you would have never seen it.
Maybe. I know I was in a discussion group on that book, and I talked about what it meant to me, and a couple of people responded that they saw that too, and other people had no idea what I was talking about.
That's why having discussion groups and friends and people to bounce it off of is so helpful.
Yeah.
And I think we need to be ready in a certain way. We need a certain amount of experience. We need a certain amount of perspective so that you can catch it in the way that you caught it. And thank you for sharing it and passing it on to me and the listeners, because I know what you're talking about. I've seen that in clinic.
Yeah.
And on both sides of it, like you say, opposites are also true. I've seen it in the case where too much attention. I've seen it in the case of not enough. Like, okay, I know what that I actually know what that feels like. There's a feeling I get, at least from the excess type. I usually get annoyed. It's like, oh God, you're really going to go there with that? Like, we've already got enough to work with.
I know.
But now when that comes up, I'm like, oh.
Well, that's a symptom of...
Oh, now I see what might be going on. Okay, great. Now I know what to do. Thank you.
Yeah. There was something you just said that I was going to say, the other thing from perspective of so many years is that I realize that people find the tools that work with them, work for them, like stems and branches might work for you or it might not work for you.
I don't know. I'm going to find out.
Right. You have to check it and see, but people find the ways of thinking or the tools that work for them. And it may work for them, but not for someone else. And you have to see.
Yep. So often these days, again, I love this conversation with you because it's so exciting to be like way past midlife and be so enthused about what we do.
Mm-hmm.
That's cool. That's a blessing.
Mm-hmm.
Lucky us. And for the longest time, I always thought it was so much about like what I did. And increasingly, it's more about how I am or how I do. It's not about the what as much as it is about the how. I've been exploring that a bit lately. It's just a little mind shift. Like,
Mhm.
not what I do in clinic, how I am in clinic. It just brings a slightly different tool, in a sense, tool of attention.
Well, what I said is in the beginning that I was studying the Taoist writings as cultivation, just observing it, and I'm back to that again.
Mm,
And it's about how you are and your presence making a difference. I mean, you use this tool or that tool or this theory or that theory, but it's about how you bring yourself into that and how you've embodied that. Like your example of the stems and branches is I couldn't use it unless I embodied it somehow.
I do not have it anywhere close to embodied.
Yeah.
Let me just put that out right now. It's nowhere close to embodied. It's this bit of curiosity that keeps fluttering in my attention. It's like, I'm still here. I'm still here.
I know what
Yeah,
you're talking about it,
yeah.
and I actually took those lectures from Deborah. That's where you saw me
Mm-hmm.
recently, because I was curious. But at the moment, I don't have enough excitement about it to go further, but I might at some point.
You got your Dallas thing going right now.
Yeah, right. But I was curious. I wanted to see what it was and if it really grabbed me or not. And it didn't grab me enough at this point.
I mean, this is the wonderful thing about practicing the medicine that we practice. There's plenty of different ways that we can bring ourselves to it and plenty of different methods that we can get playful with.
Yes.
There's something else I wanted to touch on here, and this does connect in with the how we are. This is prior to us sitting down for a conversation today. I understand that in the past you've done some research with having yourself hooked up to some kind of neural feedback and having your patients hooked up to some neural feedback and looking at what's happening in between patient and practitioner. I mean, we've been talking for the past hour about connecting with people, but this is another way of looking at other things that are going on
Mhm.
with how people are connected. And I'd love to hear a little bit more about that.
Well, the idea I was working with this psychologist who used neurofeedback and was basically retraining brainwave functions. And I was really curious about it. And I talked to him about the possibility of looking at what happened to me while I was treating someone and looking at what happened to them in their brainwaves. And we had several patients that we shared that he knew. I did 5 people in this little study, and I think 2 of them he had treated. Me I can't remember if it was 2 or 3, it's a number of years ago, and so he did a general point. It was actually GV20, so you could read the whole brain and some other little points to anchor it. And I did a root treatment in Toyohari, very basic one of 5 points. And it turned out that of the 5 people, 4 of them, I did the same points, even though they're different people with different problems and so on. So that gave it an interesting perspective as well. It just turned out that's what they showed up with, or that's I hadn't sorted that out ahead of time that was going to be the case. But one of the things he noticed was I wanted to see if there was some resonance between my brain waves and theirs. I had no idea if there was. It didn't show up that way, but what he noticed was with each person, my brain waves were different.
Oh, wow.
So I was relating to them differently with my brain waves in me as I treated them. So I was different with each person. And not so much from how I was talking to them specifically, it was my brainwaves were different. The other thing was that, as I said, 4 of them, it ended up being the same points. Um, one of them was a little bit different, but each one of them had different reactions to those same points. And one of the people was someone who had MS, and he had treated her. before with neurofeedback, or he worked with her with neurofeedback. And he said, you see, in her, those points lit up things that had to do with motor points in the brain. That's what she needed. Not that I was focusing on doing anything to her motor points, but what she needed, she got from the general root treatment that I did in those places. And he pointed that out in the other people too, that they all had different reactions because what they needed got fulfilled by the same point. So general treatment, I don't mean general just not paying attention to the patient, but treating people on their root imbalance allowed them to get what healing they personally needed. It wasn't about the points.
No.
And isn't that incredible?
Well, again, I'm back to what we were talking about earlier. You meet them where they are.
Yes.
You needle to that trigger in the midst of emptiness and stillness. And then the patient decides what they're going to do with that.
Right.
And that your brain was different with each patient. That, I wasn't expecting to hear that. I was expecting to hear, oh yeah, look, they come into this coherence and this balance with each other. But no, your brain was different with each person because your attention, because how you're attending, what you're attending to, is there energy out, is there energy in? You need to be different to connect with them. That makes total sense, given what we've talked about today.
And I wasn't aware that I was being different with them. It wasn't obvious to me, but he was amazed. And he said he never had acupuncture, and he didn't ask me to treat him either, but he had never had it. He said, this stuff really does something. Look what it's done to these people's brainwaves.
Well, how about that?
He was so floored. He said, my goodness, you got so much change, and the ways they needed it. He didn't realize I was doing the same points on everyone. He wouldn't focus on that. He was just trying to get the readings on 2 people at one time.
Well, that's great. He's focused on his piece of it, so that's really helpful for any kind of a study.
Yeah.
You know, if he's looking at the points and coming up with an idea about what those points might mean, maybe he's influencing the results that way. But no, he's just looking at brainwaves.
No, he was just trying to make sure, and that the leads weren't, because I was moving around with leads off my head.
Oh man, that's great. Thank you. It's always extraordinary to, yeah.
It was very interesting, but it wasn't done in a way that could be published. Someone said you could publish it as a letter in a research journal, but you can't publish it because there's no placebo and there's too few people and so on. But it was interesting. I was trying to get someone to help me figure out how to pursue it, and I dropped it. So it's a number of years ago. But it was an interesting idea.
No, it's an interesting idea. You've done a fascinating pilot. Maybe some doctoral student listening to this will think, hey, yeah, we could dig into this. So who knows? You might hear from somebody.
Yeah, that's true.
Oh, Zoe, this has been an absolute delight today.
Yeah.
To spend a little time with you, and I thank you so much for your perspective and unbridled enthusiasm for the work after 46 years. Contagious enthusiasm for the work.
Oh, well, thank you. I love the way you do your interviews. You do that with the interview, like I was saying, bring out the patient in your treatment, and you're very good at doing it in the interview.
Do you know how I learned to talk like this?
How?
By being an acupuncturist and being with patients. This is just how I am with patients.
Uh-huh.
I'm like this, except I have needles. No microphones, just needles. It's like what you do, right? I think it's what many of us do. We're following we are inquisitively, with kind of an open heart and a sense of being unfettered, following something to see what's here.
Mm-hmm.
So here's what happened. Here's how I learned to talk this way and be this way with people. I'm not great with differential diagnosis. I'm not great at it. So all those great patterns that we learned and things that you're supposed to know, and the patient walks in the room and the doctor knows what's wrong with them. I had that image. I'm supposed to be that guy, right? The superior doctor. Person walks in, you know what you're going to do. And man, it's rough because not only did I not have that capability, but people walk in and they talk to me and I talk to them and I go through the 10 questions and I go through some more questions. And, I should know what the damn pattern is by now so I can treat them. But I didn't know. I didn't know what to do. And what I learned to do over time, again, because I'm not great with differential diagnosis, I had to hang out with the patient in some way and engage them in different parts of them in some way that at some point they would tell me what they needed.
Yes.
And they would tell me what they needed. And I go, oh, I get it. In the same way that the patient who didn't tell you about her emotions,
Mm-hmm.
you palpated her back and you went, not in the tissues. Sometimes people will say something to me and I'll go, oh.
Yes, exactly.
There it is. And then in time, I've also been practicing more with my hands so that I can put my hands on people and it's like, okay, they just told me something that makes no sense given what I'm feeling on their belly. Or sometimes I'll just feel their belly and go, oh yeah, I see there's a liver issue.
Yeah.
And it's taken me a lot of time of listening attentively until it's like the penny drops. It's like, it. Something comes through and it's like, that, start here.
I have to say that I didn't say this in the beginning. When I started practicing acupuncture, I had so little training. Much less than you did, I'm sure.
Mm.
I had to learn from my patients,
Mm-hmm.
just like you're saying. And when I got around to studying other more sort of classical TCM kind of acupuncture, I said, yeah, I figured that out from watching what happened with patients. And I thought, wow, that's amazing. It really is true because I figured it out.
It really is true.
But it's because I was desperate to figure out what to do with people. And I had so little training. It was amazing how I even ended up there.
One step at a time, probably.
But just like you, I had to really pay attention and hang out and try and figure out what was going on. I had some desire to do something with the needles that were in my hand. Yeah, so that's how we got here.
That's how we got here. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for this delightful time together today.
Yes. Thank you.
I loved Zoe's story of Father Claude Lar, who went deep into translating classic aspects of Chinese medicine because, as he basically said, if you're odd, then double down on that. As a younger person, that is the last thing I wanted to do. Good Lord, if I could only iron out my weirdness, then maybe I'd have an easier ride through life. But doubling down on the thing that makes you odd, it is also the thing that enlivens your curiosity and keeps tugging at your attention. I suspect that thing that makes us strange, that's the X on your own personal treasure map. The other thing Zoe mentioned that seems like a worthwhile practice to cultivate was how she's come to the practice of meeting her patients, engaging without forcing anything on them, meeting at the interface of where they are and what they might yet become. I think it's not that our work fixes people, but rather it frees them. Well, friends, that is probably a pretty good place to put a bookmark in it for today. I hope that you have found our time together to be helpful and interesting and worth the time that you spent with us today. We will be back again next Tuesday. Be sure to tune into your podcast app for another excitingly geological Conversation on Medicine. Well, here we are at the end of this episode. If you've listened up to this point, you're either a rabid fan of Qiological or the forward button on your podcast player stopped working. If you are indeed a fan of the podcast, you can help us to bring new episodes to our community of practitioners by supporting us with a membership or a one-time contribution. Details, of course, are on the website. That's it for today, friends. Join us again next Tuesday for another thoughtful episode of Qiological.